Today, I'm going to that party, and I'm gonna rock it.
He hadn't touched me in 3 years, hadn't looked at me, hadn't greeted me in public, hadn't spoken my name in front of a single capo of the Santoro Familia. I was the wife the contract demanded, and the inconvenience he preferred to pretend didn't exist. Until tonight. Tonight is the annual gala. Every ally, every enemy, every reporter he has in his pocket. And I stepped out of the car in white. White like the bride Luciano Santoro never wanted. The flashes swallowed me whole on the red carpet. From the mezzanine, Luciano froze with the whiskey glass at his lips and didn't drink. Finally, I had his attention, and I hadn't come this far just to have it. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1, The Night of the White Dress. The zipper closed up my back, and I felt the decision lock into my body like a screw tightened all the way down. The dress was white like the bride Luciano Santoro never wanted. Deep V-neck, 3 inches lower than any wife of the boss of New York's 5 families would dare to wear to a public gala. A flowing train dragging across the suite's carpet, hair loose, falling over my bare shoulders. The long diamond earrings he gave me on our second wedding anniversary, because the Familia's protocol demanded it. 3 years. 3 years of black dresses, closed mouths, and an empty seat beside me at dinners where everyone noticed the seat was empty. 3 years sleeping in a separate suite, on the same floor as him, pretending the door between the rooms didn't exist. 3 years with the Santoro name stuck to mine, and 0 right to be looked at when he crossed a room. In the first 6 months, I thought it was shyness on his part. In the next 6, strategy. In the second year, pure contempt. And in the third, I discovered a fourth possibility that hadn't occurred to anyone inside that palace. And it was that discovery that brought me here, standing in front of the mirror, inside that dress. I looked at my reflection, and barely recognized myself. Good. He wouldn't recognize me either. I grabbed the crystal clutch, the red lipstick case, the phone I used only for Fiamma. I took a deep breath, and walked out of the suite. The Santoro penthouse took up the top 2 floors of a building on the Upper East Side, and the 42nd, where the bedrooms were, was silent. Luciano had gone down to the gala an hour earlier, escorted by the 2 security cars, without knocking on my door to ask if I was ready. Because for the last 3 years, he never had. I called the private elevator. The steel door opened with a soft sound, and I stepped in without hurry, watching my reflection in the mirrored wall until the panel marked the basement garage. When the doors opened, Orso was there. Orso Falcone was Luciano's personal shield. 34 years old, broad shoulders, a thin scar running down his right eyebrow. In 3 years, he'd exchanged fewer words with me than a waiter does in a single night. His job was to drive, watch, and keep quiet. And at that moment, standing beside the armored car, he did something I'd never seen him do. He raised his eyebrows. "Mrs. Santoro," Orso said, opening the rear door. His voice was dry as a blade dragged across stone. "Orso." I got in. He shut the door, walked around the car, got in on his side, and started the engine. The tinted windows sliced the city into gold strips. The Hotel Verena, in Midtown, was 20 minutes from the penthouse on that Saturday's traffic. I rested my temple against the glass and let memory do its work. The dinner for my 23rd birthday, in the penthouse dining room, with his chair empty and his place set. He showed up at 3 in the morning, smelling of whiskey and a meeting in Atlantic City, and walked past my suite door without stopping. The trip to Sicily that first summer, when he left me at a beachfront hotel in Taormina for 5 days, and not a single phone call. I came back to New York with skin more burned than my pride. The first gala, 3 months after the wedding, he introduced me to 3 capos as Arturo D'Angelo's daughter, never as his wife, never as Caterina. I swallowed all of it, because the contract my father signed demanded it, because the Familia Santoro demanded it, because I was 22 when I was handed over, and I believed deep down that his silence was some kind of protection. Today, I stopped believing. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Orso asked, looking in the rearview mirror. I lifted my chin. "I'm great." He didn't answer. The Hotel Verena came into view 2 blocks later, with the red carpet rolled out from the main entrance to the curb, and a crowd of photographers pressed behind the velvet ropes. Orso stopped the car in front of the entrance, got out, circled the hood, and opened my door without exchanging another word. I stepped out. The flashes exploded before my heel even hit the ground. I stepped onto the carpet and the shouting started. My name, his last name, requests for a photo, request to look right, left, up. No Santoro wife had shown up to a gala without her husband in the last 30 years, and no Santoro wife had ever shown up to a gala in white. I walked slowly. I let them see. I smiled for the cameras, as if the contract I'd signed at 22 had been my idea. The train dragging behind my feet, the neckline cutting through the flashes in every photo, my hair spreading in the warm breeze slipping out of the lit-up lobby. I climbed the 3 hotel steps and went in. Fiamma was in the middle of the lobby, standing there, an emerald dress molded to her body and a champagne flute in her hand. Fiamma Conte was a curator at the Conte Gallery in Chelsea, my best friend since her gallery became part of the Familia's laundering operation 3 years earlier, and the only person in the world who knew what I'd decided to do that night. She looked me up and down, slowly, and her shoulders started shaking with laughter. "Katerina," Fiamma said, not lowering her voice, "if he doesn't drop dead of a stroke right now, I'll pay for your divorce. Don't say that here. I'll say it wherever I want." Fiamma kissed me on the cheek and took my arm. "Come on, get in there. They've been waiting for you for 20 minutes and nobody knows it's you they're waiting for." The Verena's ballroom opened behind a double mahogany door, guarded by 2 security men in black suits who recognized Fiamma and opened up without giving me a second look. We walked through the door together. The ballroom hit me like a wave. Heavy chandeliers dropping from the ceiling, round tables dressed in gold linen, a string quartet in the far corner playing softly, 200 people circulating in tuxedos and custom gowns. The Familia's official press was filming from the mezzanine. I felt the stares before I saw any specific face. A gray-haired man stopped lifting his glass to his mouth. A woman in a red dress nudged her husband's shoulder. An older capo, near the bar, narrowed his eyes as if he were trying to confirm that I really was who his head kept insisting I was. And on the mezzanine, leaning against the railing with a whiskey glass between his fingers, there he was, Luciano Santoro, black silk shirt with the top 3 buttons undone, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, the double crown tattoos climbing up his right forearm. 32 years old, the youngest boss of New York's 5 families, the man whose name I carried and who, for the last 3 years, had looked at me in public exactly 0 times. He was talking to one of the capos when a flash from the ballroom reached the top of the mezzanine and his head turned, on reflex, toward the glare. He saw me. I caught the exact instant. It was like watching a steel wall take a crack down the middle. His jaw locked. His conversation with the capo died mid-sentence, and the hand holding the whiskey started rising to his mouth in a motion he'd made 1,000 times that night. Except this time the glass stopped. It stopped 2 centimeters from his lips, and didn't come down. I stood still in the middle of the ballroom. My breath caught somewhere between my collarbone and my throat, forcing my face to give nothing away. No smile, no surprise, no silent apology for the audacity of the dress. I hadn't come to apologize. Fiamma squeezed my arm. "He saw you," she whispered. "I know. Katerina, he's coming down." I lifted my chin and looked up, straight at him. No flinching, no blinking. Luciano set the glass on the railing without looking at where it landed, said one short word to the capo beside him, and started moving toward the mezzanine stairs with the calm of a man who has never needed to hurry a step in his life. Every stair he came down, the entire ballroom noticed. Heads began to turn. Waiters changed their routes. A capo from the West Wing, Carmine Santoro, Luciano's uncle, brother of the dead father, gray hair slicked back and a suit too expensive for a man who'd never made it to boss, set his flute on the table and stood there watching, as if calculating every move of his nephews. It wasn't the kind of look you give a relative. It was the look of a man studying an opponent. I filed his face away, filed away the exact expression, and turned my eyes back to Luciano, who was already halfway down the stairs. 15 steps. 10. 5. Fiamma peeled away from me in a discreet move, backing toward the bar, because Fiamma knew when a scene needed 2 characters and not 3. Luciano reached the ballroom floor and started crossing it toward me. No rush, not looking at anyone, cutting through the party in a straight line. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, didn't make the public husband gesture a photographer would have expected. He just walked up to me and stopped half a meter away, close enough for me to smell the cedar and the whiskey and the silk shirt he'd picked out without telling me. "Katerina," he said, low voice, controlled, the tone of a man holding thunder behind his teeth. "Luciano, white. It's the color I chose. Tonight, he studied my face, ran his eyes over my bare shoulders, the neckline, the hem of the dress, the train behind my feet, and back to my face. His jaw locked twice while he made the trip. "Who brought you?" "Orso." "On whose orders?" "Mine." He breathed out through his nose, a deep inhale, and for the first time in 3 years, Luciano Santoro looked at me as if I were alive in front of him. We need to talk. We need to dance first. I tipped my chin toward the string quartet. You're in a ballroom full of allies and enemies who just watched your wife walk in without you. If we leave now, you lose half the respect it took you 5 years to build. He didn't blink, but the corner of his mouth moved. A tiny movement, almost a smile, almost nothing. You thought of everything. I had 3 years to think. He held his hand out to me. It wasn't a tender gesture. It was a command. Palm open, fingers spread, tattooed forearm exposed to the elbow. If I accepted, I was telling 200 people that the Santoro marriage wasn't a contract fiction. If I refused, I was declaring war in the middle of the dance floor. I placed my hand over his. Luciano's fingers closed around mine with a force that had nothing casual about it. His wedding ring, which I'd never seen him wear in public before, pressed into my skin. He pulled me one step toward the center of the ballroom. And it was on that step that I heard, behind me, Carmine Santoro's voice rising from the bar in a tone he'd calculated to reach us. Would you look at that? Carmine said, loud enough for the nearest capos to hear. My nephew finally remembered he was married. Luciano stopped. The whole ballroom stopped with him. His hand tightened on mine with a new kind of pressure. Not intimacy, warning. His eyes rose slowly to find his uncle across the floor, and what crossed Luciano's face in that second was something no family portrait had ever captured. Coldness, calculation, and something deeper, underneath, that I only understood much later. Carmine smiled at him, raised his flute, and took a sip. Luciano turned his eyes back to me. Stay close, he said, low, barely moving his lips. When I call for you, you come. Don't leave Fiamma's side. Why? He didn't answer. He squeezed my hand once more, and made the gesture to lead me toward the bar. The string quartet started a new piece. The press flashes came back. The ballroom resumed breathing. But I'd seen it. I'd seen the look Luciano threw at his uncle, seen the smile Carmine threw back, and I'd come to that gala knowing 2 names, one financial trail, and a secret that, if it landed on the wrong table, would rip a man out of his chair before Sunday broke. One of those names was Carmine Santoro. Chapter 2. The Color He Didn't Want to See. I didn't dance. Luciano walked me through the middle of the ballroom with his hand still closed around mine, went straight past the string quartet, and stopped at the bar, where he handed my elbow over to Fiamma's line of sight and said just one sentence. Don't take your eyes off her. Fiamma nodded with her chin. No joking this time. Luciano let go of my hand and crossed the ballroom again, this time in the opposite direction, toward where Carmine had gone back to laughing with 3 West Wing capos, as if the earlier jab had never happened. Caterina, Fiamma whispered, leaning toward my shoulder. What was that just now? Carmine poked him. I saw. The whole ballroom saw. Fiamma, pay attention. I grabbed a champagne flute off a passing tray and spun it between my fingers. Luciano told me to stay close to you and not leave. If anyone comes up to this bar, we go to the ladies' room together. You think, I'm not thinking anything. I'm obeying the first useful order he's given me in 3 years. Fiamma laughed softly, a dry laugh, a laugh from a woman who understood the gravity and was choosing to laugh so she wouldn't shake. The ballroom stayed in motion. I watched every face that passed through my field of view. The North Wing capo arguing with a younger soldier, a woman in a dark blue dress eyeing my neckline with admiration and envy in equal measure, 2 internal security men switching positions near the main door. And then he showed up. Giuliano Della Rocca was 29, son of the Della Rocca capo out of New Jersey, Santoro allies for 2 generations, and he came up to the bar with a smile he'd probably been using since he was 16 to talk girls into accepting rides. Light eyes, clean-shaven jaw, the kind of naivete that survives when your father shields you from everything that might have toughened you up. Caterina, he greeted me. Giuliano. My God, I what? Look different, I laughed. Not for real. A short, calculated laugh, the kind a young, good-looking, slightly naive man would read as an invitation. Fiamma next to me choked on her champagne. Giuliano, you've known me since my wedding. I leaned toward him just a little, enough to bring the neckline into his peripheral. This is the first time you've actually noticed me. I always noticed you. Pretty lie. It's the truth. He dropped his voice. It's just that Luciano never let anyone get near you. I raised an eyebrow. Take a look around the ballroom, Giuliano. Is he here? Giuliano looked. Luciano was on the other side, talking to Carmine in a tone the capos around them couldn't catch. Luciano's right hand was in his pants pocket. I knew that posture of his. I'd seen it hundreds of times from my suite window. It was the posture of an armed man taking notes. He's busy. Giuliano concluded. Exactly. Katerina, you think what? That this is happening way too fast. I tilted my head. That was a small surprise. Giuliano was smarter than I'd figured, or more of a coward, which, inside that family, usually came out the same. Then stay with me for 5 more minutes, I said. Tell me that Monaco story your dad cut off the last time. That story. That one. He started telling it. Gestured, laughed, leaned in my direction to whisper the riskier part. I smiled at the right beat, touched his arm lightly at the right beat, and let my hand rest a second longer than protocol allowed. I knew what I was doing. Across the ballroom, the move I'd been waiting for started. Luciano stepped away from his uncle with a sharp stride, cut across the floor on the diagonal, and came toward me with no obvious hurry, not looking at anyone, cutting through 200 people in a straight line. The ballroom noticed. The conversations didn't stop, but they dropped in volume. Heads tracked his trajectory with small movements, as if nobody wanted to admit they were watching. A waiter changed his route to avoid crossing his path. Giuliano was still laughing at his own story when Luciano arrived. He stopped behind me. I felt his heat before I felt his hand, the wide palm settling in the middle of my back, against the bare skin the dress left uncovered. A light touch. And to anyone watching from a distance, husbandly. To me, it burned. Giuliano, Luciano said. His voice was low, almost cordial. Luciano. The poor kid went pale. Mrs. Santoro was just my wife, Luciano cut in, and those 2 words dropped at the bar like a stone inside a crystal flute. My wife is cold. He took off his own jacket, one single precise motion, and draped it over my shoulders. He adjusted the fabric with both hands, fastened the lapel at the base of my neck. So close I felt his breath on my temple. Better now, he said, looking straight at Giuliano. Giuliano got it before the sentence was over. He stepped back half a pace, raised his glass and a swallowed toast, and excused himself like a man who'd just figured out he'd stepped into a well-set trap. Luciano dropped his hand to my elbow. Come on, he said, low, next to my ear. Come on where? To the car. The party's barely started. Katerina. He squeezed my elbow hard enough for me to feel the force under the politeness. You're going to walk to that side door with me right now, or I'm carrying you out in front of every one of these people. Pick. I smiled at him. A Santoro wife at a gala smile, trained over 3 years of practice. Fiamma, in my peripheral vision, was trying not to crack up and failing. Lead the way then, husband, I said, loud enough for the 2 nearest tables to hear. Luciano didn't blink, but his jaw locked in a way I'd never seen up close. He slid his hand down to my wrist, closed his fingers around it, and walked me to the side exit, through a door I hadn't even realized was there. The service corridor was narrow, lit by a hard yellow light. 2 security men leaned against the walls to let us pass. Neither of them looked directly at Luciano. We cut through the corridor to a back door that opened onto an alley. The armored car was already there. Orso at the wheel, engine running, rear door open. Luciano pushed me in by the waist, got in behind me, and slammed the door. Go, he said to Orso, without looking. Orso pulled out before the seatbelt clicked. The cabin glass went up, separating the back seat from the driver, and the cabin light went out, leaving only the gleam of storefront windows running across our faces. The car turned onto Park Avenue. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 10. 15 seconds of silence. 3 years, I said. Katerina. 3 years, Luciano. I pulled the jacket off my shoulders and tossed it onto the middle seat. 3 years without looking at me in a room. And tonight you show up at the bar and say, my wife is cold. You know why I did that. I know why you did it tonight. I don't know why you didn't do it the other 1,000 days. He turned his face toward me. The light from a storefront passed over his jaw and died at the collar of his shirt. Do you have any idea what you did walking into that ballroom like that? I do. I leaned my body toward his. I did exactly what I wanted you to see. Giuliano della Rocca is a kid. Giuliano della Rocca was the first man in that ballroom who looked at me in 3 years. That, Luciano said, and his voice dropped, wasn't a good thing, Katerina. Not for him. Not for you. Then you look. What? You. Look. At me. I drove each word in public, as a husband, as the man who signed his name next to mine. Because if the problem was Giuliano looking, the solution was you looking first. He was quiet. The car entered the short tunnel before Park. The lampposts ran past the windows in a rhythmic pattern. "You have no idea," he said, low, "what I was sparing you from. Sparing me. I swallowed 3 years of humiliation thinking I was being spared. I was stupid, Luciano, but I'm not anymore." He turned all the way toward me. His hand came up to my chin before I could pull back. "You weren't stupid," he said, and his voice was almost hoarse. "You were mine." I was what? Mine. In a way even you couldn't stand to look at. He kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was 3 years arriving late. His mouth found mine like he was breaking a rule he'd imposed on himself, and the breath of whiskey and something darker burned on my tongue. I grabbed the collar of his shirt with my free hand, because the other one was trapped in the jacket thrown on the seat. He pulled me by the chin, then by the nape, and I felt the weight of his fingers in my hair, as if he were afraid to let go. The kiss lasted what it lasted. I pulled away first, not because I wanted to, because if I didn't pull away, I wouldn't be able to anymore. "No," I said, breath wrecked. "Not like this." He rested his forehead against mine for a second. "Just one. Like this. How? You want to kiss me because another man looked." I pushed his chest with the tips of my fingers slowly. "Kiss me because you're the one looking, Luciano. And come talk to me again when you figure out the difference." He pulled back. The rest of the drive, nobody spoke. Orso stopped the car in the 42nd floor garage and didn't get out. He waited for Luciano to open my door himself, which he did, in silence, like a man still deciding whether he wanted to argue. I got on the private elevator ahead of him. He stepped in behind me. The door shut. The elevator stopped on the 42nd floor. I got out, walked down the interior corridor to my suite door, opened it, went in, and slammed the door. I stayed leaning against it from the inside, listening. He stood on the other side for exactly 7 seconds, without knocking, without speaking. Then his footsteps moved off toward the master bedroom. He didn't come after me, but for the first time in 3 years, I knew, I could feel it, through the door that trembled with his breathing on the other side, that he'd stayed. Chapter 3. The Unlocked Study. I woke up too early and too late at the same time. Too early for a Sunday. Too late to pretend I hadn't stayed up half the night listening to the corridor between my suite and his room. No footsteps came back. I checked twice. I took my time in the shower, pulled on a pair of light-tailored pants and a silk blouse that didn't require any effort, twisted my hair into a low bun, and went downstairs barefoot to the kitchen, sandals in hand. The penthouse took up the building's top 2 floors. The 42nd had the bedrooms and the suites. The 41st had the living room, the library, his study, and the main kitchen. The interior stairs spiraled down in white marble, and I came down stepping firm, because I wasn't going to tiptoe through my own Sunday. Luciano was in the kitchen, gray linen shirt, 2 buttons undone, hair still a little damp from the shower, the newspaper open on the marble island, the coffee cup in his right hand, his tattooed forearm resting on the countertop. He looked up when I walked in. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning." 3 years in the same house. 6 Sundays at most, when we'd crossed paths in the kitchen. Not a single good morning exchanged between us on any of those Sundays. I went to the coffee machine, filled a cup, and leaned against the counter facing him, the island between us. "You stayed up late," he said. "So did you. I have meetings on Saturday nights." "Strange." I took a sip. "Last night you left the gala earlier than you planned." He set the cup down, folded the paper, pushed it aside until it stopped at the edge of the island. "About last night." "What about last night?" "The kiss." I didn't blink. "Which part of the kiss?" "I crossed a line." "You did." "I'm going to fix it." "How?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know yet," he said. That answer, coming from that man, disarmed me for a whole second. Luciano Santoro didn't say, "I don't know." Luciano Santoro looked at a situation and gave an order. For him to admit ignorance in the kitchen, barefoot, with me on the other side of the island, was a new fact in the universe. Orso appeared in the doorway leading to the living room, carrying a black folder. "Boss, the report's here." He looked at me, then at the coffee cup, then at me again. "Mrs. Santoro." "Orso." He turned to leave, stopped at the door, didn't turn back around. "If you decide to go with black at the next gala, ma'am, the building would appreciate it, for the boss's blood pressure." He was gone before Luciano could answer. I almost choked on my coffee. Luciano stared at the empty doorway, with an expression I'd never seen on his face, something between surprise and betrayed amusement. "I like him," I said. "You shouldn't. He's the first person in this house in 3 years who's treated me like I'm alive." Luciano didn't answer, but his jaw locked the same way it had locked at the gala, and I realized he'd heard every word and understood every one. I finished my coffee in silence. When I turned to leave the kitchen, he spoke again. Without raising his eyes from the paper he was no longer reading. Katerina. Yes? Please don't go down to the garage today without Orso. Why? Just... He stopped. Picked the word. Just give me that. I nodded slowly. Went up the marble stairs without answering. But I filed that request away whole, right next to Carmine's name. Monday afternoon, the Conte Gallery in Chelsea smelled like fresh paint and Italian coffee, and Fiamma was barefoot on top of a stool, straightening a huge canvas by an Iranian painter she'd discovered the year before. If you came here to tell me what happened after Luciano dragged you out of the ballroom, she said without turning, I've already got a bottle of wine open. I did. Get off that stool, Fiamma. She got down, poured me a glass in the back room, closed the door to the hallway, and sat across from me with her legs folded on the couch. Talk, I told her. The bar, Giuliano, the jacket, the car, the kiss, the slammed door. Fiamma listened without interrupting. When I finished, she took a long sip from her glass and looked at the ceiling. Katerina, she said, he's going to want you now. I know, and when he does, it's going to be a problem you don't know how to handle yet. I know, Fiamma. I've been studying him for 3 years. She turned her eyes back to me. What? I've been studying him. I set the glass on the low table. I learned the capos' names, learned the financial patterns of the galleries, yours included, learned what leaves the port, what comes in, who carries it, who signs for it, learned the movements of the Biancos out of Brooklyn and the Kovats out of Queens. I haven't been quiet these 3 years, Fee. I've been invisible. It's different. Fiamma stared at me for a long time. Does Luciano know? No. Are you going to tell him? Tomorrow. Katerina. Tomorrow, Fiamma. Because if I wait any longer, Carmine gets to him before I do. She closed her eyes for a second, opened them. Carmine what? I'll tell you later. Right now I need you to do something for me. What? One of the Kovats is buying pieces through a Russian's gallery in Tribeca, double laundering. I need to know the buyer's name and the date of the next delivery. Fiamma took a deep breath. You're insane. I am. I can do it, she said. By Wednesday. Perfect. I walked out of the gallery lighter in the head than I'd walked in. Took the subway up to the Upper East Side without using the car. My own little act of disobedience against the morning's request. Wednesday night I walked into his study without knocking. Luciano was seated behind the dark walnut desk, with a metal lamp lighting only the right half of his face. White shirt, sleeves rolled up, 2 open papers, an untouched glass of whiskey. He raised his eyes when I came in. Katerina. I crossed the study, stopped in front of the desk, and set a folded sheet on top of the wood. He looked at the sheet, looked at me, unfolded the paper. 2 names, a date, a prediction. The Kovats are going to move the shipment next Thursday. The man on the inside is Inspector Aaron Voss, Sector 4, overnight shift. Payment off the books went through the Russian Levitsky's gallery in Tribeca, via a canvas attributed to Mirandai that never existed. Luciano read it twice. Then he slowly lifted his eyes. How do you know this? I learned it. Katerina. His voice was very low. How do you know this? I sat in the chair across from the desk, crossed my legs, took his glass of whiskey and drank half of it in one swallow. You haven't been locking your study for 3 years. What? Not always. Sometimes when you came back from a meeting in Atlantic City, you forgot. I'd go in. You'd go in. I'd go in. Look, read, memorize. Put everything back where it was. He stood up slowly. Do you have any idea, he said, his voice pressed thin, what I'd do to any man in this organization who did what you just told me you did? I do. I set the glass on the desk. But I'm not a man in this organization. I'm your wife. And you gave me the keys to this study along with the ring, Luciano. You just never thought I was going to use both. He came around the desk, slowly, stopped in front of me, his thighs nearly touching my knees. His cologne reached me before his hands did. Stand up. I stood up. He put one hand on my waist, the other on my jaw, lifted my face to the height of his mouth and stayed there, 2 centimeters away, his breath meeting mine without touching. I was going to kiss you just now, Luciano said, low. Going to throw you across this desk, send Orso home, and make up for 3 years in one afternoon. You showed me that paper, and now I can't. You know why? I didn't blink. Because if I kiss you after you hand me 2 names and a date, you're going to think I stayed with you because of this. And you always will, Katerina. Every time I touch you for the next 50 years. His hand let go of my jaw before my mouth could answer. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was something new in them. Something I only understood later. Something like fear, but not for himself. And because, Luciano said, now I'm going to have to decide what to do with a wife who knows more than half of my capos. And I still don't know, Katerina, whether what I want is to protect you or lock you up. He let go of my jaw. stepped back, picked the paper up off the desk, folded it slowly, and tucked it inside his shirt pocket, over his chest. Then he looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. "Friday, you're coming with me," he said. "Where?" "Atlantic City." And before I could ask anything else, he'd crossed the study and gone out through the opposite door, leaving the whiskey, the lamp still on, and the empty spot where the woman who'd just lost the advantage of being underestimated had been standing. Thursday came before my head finished waking up. I'd slept 3 hours, maybe 4. I dreamed of his voice 2 centimeters from my mouth saying 50 years, and woke up with the phrase stuck to the roof of my mouth like lipstick that won't come off. I showered, put on linen pants, a sleeveless blouse, and went down to the kitchen without drying my hair, water dripping onto the front of the blouse. Luciano was at the Marble Island. White shirt, 2 buttons undone. The same newspaper he hadn't been reading on Sunday, open to the same page. He didn't look up when I walked in. "Good morning." "Good morning." I went to the coffee machine, filled a cup, turned toward the island, and stopped. The chair across from mine, on the other side of the counter, had been pulled back. On the marble, in the spot where I always rested my hands while I drank my coffee, there was a small porcelain plate with 2 handfuls of fresh almonds, still in their brown skins, and a small spoon next to it. I looked at the plate, looked at him. "You never knew I eat those in the morning." "I know a lot of things, Katerina." He turned the page of the paper, still without looking at me. "I just didn't feel like using what I knew until yesterday." I sat down, picked up an almond, peeled it with my thumbnail, bit half of it, left the other half between my fingers, testing him without looking to see if he was being tested. He didn't turn the page. His hand, resting on the paper, closed in a centimeter. "You going to stare at that paper without reading for a long time, until you finish your coffee?" "Why?" "Because if I look up right now, we're not going to Atlantic City tomorrow." I chewed the other half of the almond slowly, finished the coffee. When I stood up, the chair scraped on the marble, and I heard, because he'd heard first, the rhythm of his breathing shift. "Luciano." "Yeah, the rule you set last night in the study." I rested my fingertips on the edge of the marble, on the opposite side from his. "How long does it last?" "Until I can look at you without thinking I'm the one collecting." "And how am I supposed to know when that happens?" "You'll know, Katerina. You were the only person in this house in 3 years who knew how to read when I wasn't saying anything." I walked out of the kitchen before he raised his eyes. I went up the marble stairs stepping firm, without looking back, and only when I reached the 42nd floor did I realize my hand was still trembling at the wrist. It wasn't fear. It was the opposite of fear. It was my body registering that it had been seen. I spent the whole morning on the phone with Fiamma. She'd closed the gallery for 2 days to handle a delivery in Miami and was calling me from a plane, with the voice of a woman pretending she didn't have a hangover. "Kata, tell me what he did in the study yesterday. He said he wasn't going to kiss me. He said. And you believed him?" I respected it. Fiamma laughed on the other end, a laugh with teeth. "That's worse." She coughed, swallowed something. "Kata, men like that, when they set a rule for themselves, they're warning you that they're going to break it. The rule is the heads up. Do you get it? I got it this morning in the kitchen." "What happened in the kitchen?" "He set out almonds for me on a plate before I came down." Fiamma was silent for 3 seconds. Then she whispered, with a reverence only Fiamma could manage without irony, "You're done for, Katerina." "I know. So is he. I know." "Good. Don't do anything stupid until I'm back Monday. I need to see the funeral in person." I hung up. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror for a stretch of time I couldn't measure, and then I did the most provocative thing I could think of on a Thursday. I swapped the blouse for a silk slip, layered a white linen blouse over it that came past mid-thigh, and put nothing on underneath. I grabbed a book from my nightstand I hadn't read in 8 months, went down to the 41st floor library. I knew he was there. Luciano's library took up the east wing of the 41st floor, with 3 walls of walnut shelves up to the ceiling, a dark green leather sofa, and 2 armchairs turned toward a window looking out onto Park Avenue. It smelled like old paper, and some kind of wood I'd never learned to name. He was in the right-hand chair, a folder open in his lap, black-rimmed reading glasses I'd never seen on his face. Luciano didn't wear glasses. Luciano had perfect vision, and held the younger soldiers to it when they washed out of the academy's eye test. I stopped in the doorway. "Since when?" He didn't lift his head. "Always. I just don't wear them in front of people I don't know yet." "And I am?" "The only one." He turned a page in the folder, didn't look at me. I crossed the library barefoot and sat in the left-hand chair, opposite him, with the book in my lap. 10 minutes of silence. The afternoon light came through the window at a low angle, and I felt his eyes pass over the book I was pretending to read once every 2 minutes. They never found my face. The glasses helped. The glasses let his gaze drop a millimeter before it reached my eyes, and it was in that millimeter that he looked at me. I crossed my legs. The hem of the blouse rode up about 3 fingers. He turned a page in the folder with new force. Katerina, yeah, if you're trying to do something, I need to let you know it's working. I'm not doing anything. You crossed your legs. I crossed my legs. Women do that. He finally took off the glasses, set them on the folder, looked at me. It was a different look than yesterday's. Yesterday had pressure. Today had restraint. As if he were holding a dog by the collar and telling me, I'm still holding it. Why did you come down here? I always read here. In 3 years? I came 3 times. You were never here. Why today when I am? I closed the book, rested it on the arm of the chair. The movement shifted the blouse up another finger, and this time I didn't adjust it. Because I want to watch you break your rule, Luciano. I looked straight at him. Not because I need to. Because I want to know how long you can hold something you chose to hold. He leaned the back of his head against the chair, took a deep breath. I can hold out longer than you think, Katerina. Prove it. You're playing with fire. I've been married to fire for 3 years, Luciano. The new thing is that now the fire has a name. He laughed. It was a short laugh, humorless. The laugh of a man who recognized the argument and hated losing again. He leaned forward in the chair, elbows on his knees, and watched me from that low angle where he could see everything the blouse didn't cover. Stand up. Why? Because I need you to leave this room before my rule stops being mine. I stood up, walked slowly to the library door, stopped at the threshold, looked back. He was still leaning forward, both hands clasped between his knees, and his head was hanging a little lower than it usually did when he was deciding something. Luciano. Yeah, I'm going to take a shower. In my room. In my suite. Katerina, I'm telling you so you don't come down to the kitchen in the next 15 minutes. It's a courtesy. I walked out of the library without waiting for an answer. I heard the muffled sound of a folder closing hard behind me, and it was the most gratifying sound I'd collected in 3 years of marriage. I had dinner alone. Luciano didn't show up in the dining room, didn't show up in the kitchen. The housekeeper, a woman I saw twice a week, who had worked for his family since before I existed, served me a plate of pasta with butter and sage, and told me that the master had asked to have dinner in his study. Thank you, Donatella. You're welcome, ma'am. She hesitated, straightened the napkin on my right side, which didn't need straightening. Begging the liberty, ma'am, but in 16 years I've never seen the master ask for dinner in the study on a Thursday. I smiled at her over my wine glass. Thank you, Donatella. Neither have I. She left. I finished dinner without hurrying, drank 2 glasses, went up to the 42nd floor by the interior staircase, barefoot, my hair still damp from the afternoon shower, and stopped in the hallway that separated my suite from his master bedroom. The master bedroom door was closed. Light on underneath. The study door on the 41st was also closed. I'd passed it on my way up. Light on underneath, too. 2 closed doors in the same building, 2 men behind them, and it was the same man. I smiled at the wall. I went into my suite, closed the door, lay down on the bed with the white blouse still over the silk slip, taking off neither one, and listened to the penthouse. 10 minutes, 20, 40. Footsteps in the hall. His footsteps. I'd known his footsteps for 3 years. Steady cadence, heel before toe, a slight drag of the left foot when he was tired. This time he was tired. The footsteps stopped. Not at the master bedroom door. At mine. I stopped breathing. He stood there for 7 seconds. The same 7 seconds from Saturday night. I counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the 8th, the hallway floor creaked. He shifted. I heard him breathe on the other side of the door. Deep. Controlled. The breath of a man counting something down inside himself. Then the softer sound of an object being set on the floor. And the footsteps walked away. The master bedroom door opened. Closed. The light went off. I waited 2 full minutes before I got up. Went to the door. Opened it slowly. On the hallway rug, leaning against the jamb, was the book I'd left in the library that afternoon. On top of the book, open, a sheet of paper folded in half. I picked it up, recognized his handwriting before I read it. The crooked letters, half in caps, a little rushed at the ends of the words. The handwriting of a man who wrote little by hand because he had things signed in his name. You forgot it. I read to the end of the chapter where you stopped. Tomorrow at 10 on the helipad. Try to sleep. L. I read it 3 times, folded the paper, rested my forehead against the doorframe, closed my eyes. On the bottom line of the paper, in a darker ink and in a slightly different handwriting, as if he'd gone back to his desk hours later to add it, was a single word. No. Just that. No. I understood the instant I read it, because between that man and me the language had shifted from English to something older that neither of us would have the nerve to name yet. It wasn't him answering my provocation from the library. No, he hadn't broken the rule. No, he wasn't going to break it yet. It was his promise that the break, when it came, would come in a way that a note slid under the door wasn't rehearsal for. I closed the door, rested my forehead against the wood from the inside. That night, I didn't sleep, but I also didn't go to his door. Something about that handwritten no told me that, if we were going to cross that hallway, it would be in the direction he chose, at the hour he chose, because Luciano Santoro had spent 16 years building a rule that applied to everything except me, and now he was building a new one, and I was its only reason. I could wait. I'd waited 3 years for less. Chapter 4. The Two Truths. Friday afternoon, the Familia's helicopter took us from Manhattan to Atlantic City in 43 minutes. I'd put on black tailored pants and a red silk blouse with long sleeves, and Luciano, sitting beside me, hadn't said a word to me since we'd boarded. He was studying 3 folders on his thighs, writing, signing, passing them to Orso, who was seated across from us. When we touched down on the Le Corone's helipad, the warm Atlantic wind hit my face, and I remembered that casino, the Santoro's flagship, was the one place in the world I'd never set foot in during 3 years of marriage. Luciano had guarded that door like it was his last trench. Now he was opening it. The conference room was on the top floor of the casino, with a full wall of glass facing the ocean. 3 capos were already seated at the oval table when we walked in. I recognized all 3 immediately, because I had all 3 in my mental files. Enrico Vaccaro, West Wing, 52 years old, loyal. Matteo Rizzi, East Wing, 41, ambitious. And Dario Moretti, Customs, 38, recently promoted, the newest one at the table. Luciano pointed me to a chair on his right. My wife is going to sit in on the meeting. The 3 capos looked over. Enrico nodded without reacting. Matteo blinked twice. Dario smiled with his lips, and not with his eyes. I filed that smile away. The meeting lasted an hour and 20 minutes. They talked about casino numbers, about 2 new soldiers who needed to go through initiation, about a problem with a shipment at the port that Matteo had handled on Wednesday. I listened, took notes in my head, didn't say anything. Dario talked too much, not in an obvious way, in a polite, polished way, in the right places, but he spoke before he needed to, defended himself before he was accused, gave explanations to questions nobody had asked. That's a tell. When the meeting ended, Luciano took me to his private office inside the casino, closed the door, and asked, "Well, Dario?" He didn't look surprised, but his jaw locked again. "You sure?" "Sure." He explained 3 things nobody asked about. He looked at the door twice when the port came up. He didn't drink the water Matteo poured, but he drank the water Enrico brought in later. "You're saying he doesn't trust Matteo." "I'm saying he doesn't trust Matteo, but he has some kind of agreement with Enrico. That's if Enrico knows. If he doesn't, Dario is hiding behind him." Luciano looked at me for a long time, longer than the look from the study in Manhattan. "You learn fast," he said. "I learned 3 years ago, Luciano. Nobody asked." He took a deep breath. "We're going back to New York now." The flight back was different. Luciano sat by the window, his back to Orso, and reached his hand out to mine without looking. I put mine in his. He closed his fingers over mine, and didn't let go until the aircraft landed on the helipad of the Upper East Side building. The penthouse, when we walked in, smelled like jasmine. The flowers Fiamma had sent on Wednesday, which I'd left in the foyer. He didn't go to his study. He took my hand again, led me up the interior staircase to the 42nd floor, and opened a door I'd never opened in 3 years, the door to his master bedroom. But we didn't go in. He led me down the interior hallway, past the opposite door, and opened the 42nd floor terrace. New York opened up in front of me like a living map. Central Park to the right, the East River to the left, the Midtown buildings bursting with yellow light against the already dark sky. "I've never been up here," I said. "I know. You never invited me." "I know." He leaned against the railing, pulled a cigarette out of a pocket I didn't know he kept cigarettes in, lit it, took one drag, and stubbed it out against the wall, as if the urge had passed halfway through the gesture. "I was 17, he said, without looking at me. I stayed quiet. My mother's name was Katerina, the old spelling. It was pronounced almost the same as yours. That hit me in a way I hadn't expected. She died in a house in Queens. An enemy of my father's found out that he loved her. Didn't like her, didn't respect her, didn't tolerate her, loved her. It was valuable intel. My father never understood that showing her the sheer volume of what he felt was the same as writing her address on a piece of paper and slipping it into the enemy's pocket. Luciano, I was in the house that night. He looked at me for the first time since he'd started talking. His eyes were dry, but there was a weight in them I'd never seen. I was in the upstairs bedroom. I heard the door, heard my mother's voice, heard when she said my name 3 times, asked me not to come down. I didn't come down. You were 17. I was 17 and I made 2 promises that night. That I was going to hunt down the man who ordered it, and that I was never going to let anyone find out I loved someone. I couldn't answer for a second. Luciano took a deep breath, looked out at Central Park. For 15 years I searched on the wrong side of the city. Biancos, Kovacs, names my father had left on lists of enemies. Last year I understood I'd been looking too far away. The name was inside the house, in the last name I carry. Ever since, I've been waiting for a mistake I could bring to the table without breaking the familia in half. And the mistake came. The mistake came through you. He looked at me. That's why. The 3 years. It wasn't contempt, Katerina. It was the only way I knew to avoid repeating, on my floor, what my father did on his. You left me alone. I know. You left me thinking I was invisible because you didn't want me. I know. Luciano. I took his face in both my hands, forced him to look at me. Invisibility didn't protect me. It only left me alone. And one of your enemies noticed. Thought I was a piece of furniture and started moving me. He frowned. Who? We'll talk about it when I have my father's dossier. Katerina. Tomorrow. I let go of his face. I'll explain tomorrow. He pulled my wrist, drew me to him, didn't kiss me, rested his forehead against mine and stayed there, breathing with me. I'm not going to lose you, he said. You haven't had me yet. He laughed. A short, soundless laugh. The laugh of a man who recognized the argument and lost the debate. I slept in my suite that night. I didn't know it, but it was the last time. Saturday afternoon, I went to see my father. Don Arturo D'Angelo's house was on East 74th, 20 minutes from the penthouse. Orso drove. The housekeeper met me at the door. My father was in the library, sitting in the armchair he'd occupied since he retired. 68 years old, white hair, the jade ring on his left hand, the consigliere's ring that had replaced the Don's ring 3 years earlier. My girl, father. He stood up, hugged me. Let go. You know why I came. I've had the package ready for 8 months. Why didn't you give it to me? He rested his hand on the arm of the chair before answering. Because whoever accuses a Don's blood has to hand over the proof at the right time, through the right hand. If I'd gone to Luciano 8 months ago with that paper, I'd have been a retired consigliere, trying to take down the boss's uncle to favor his own daughter. That's how the whole table would have read it. Do you understand what that would have done to your marriage? I do. There was one more thing. He went over to the library table, unlocked a drawer with a key, and took out a brown folder. The first line I crossed was small, 200,000. 1 gallery, 1 name. Could have been ordinary theft. I needed to see the pattern turn into a coup. Month 7, Aaron Voss's name came up for the 3rd time. That's when it stopped being theft. It became what it is. I was waiting for you, Kata. I knew, sooner or later, you'd come knocking on this door. He handed me the folder. I sat in the armchair beside his and opened it. Internal financial movements within the Santoro familia. Small diversions at the start, concentrated in 3 Chelsea galleries, a growing pattern over 8 months. Authorization cross-signed with the digital signature of a single capo, Carmine Santoro. He's stealing, I said. He's buying. Buying what? Loyalty. I looked at my father. How many? 3 capos minimum. Plus the port inspector Luciano thinks is the Kovacs informant. Aaron Voss. He raised his eyebrows. You know the name. I know a lot of things, father. Don Arturo smiled. A small, tired smile. The smile of an old man who recognizes in his daughter something that had gotten past him for entire years. Kata, he said. One last thing. What? Be careful with what Luciano inherited from his mother, not just from his father. Meaning? I'll explain later. Right now, take the package to him. Tonight. I stood up, tucked the folder under my arm, kissed my father on the forehead, left. Orso's car pulled into the penthouse's private garage at 9:23 p.m. Halfway back, Orso had noticed the same black sedan in the rear view twice, once pulling out of East 74th, once 3 blocks from the garage. He didn't mention it to me. He memorized the plate, like he did with everything, and kept driving. The private elevator was down for maintenance. Orso called the service elevator, the one that went up the east side of the building, with direct access to the 42nd floor hallway. I'll come up with you, ma'am. Park the car in the spot first. If it stays in the loading zone, the front desk hits us with a fine. I'll go up ahead, Orso. 2 minutes. His phone rang before he could answer. He glanced at the screen, Luciano's name, and picked up with his jaw already locked. I stepped into the elevator before the conversation ended. The door closed between us, and I rode up alone, the brown folder pressed against my chest, a small dizziness in my fingers. I chalked up to fatigue. The doors opened on the 42nd floor. The hallway was dim. The middle light had gone out, which never happened in that building. I stepped onto the rug, took 3 steps. 3 men came out of the emergency stairwell door on my left. 1 behind, 2 in front. Black suits, black fabric masks, armed. The folder, the one in front said. "And you come with us." No screaming. I didn't scream. The gun Luciano had made me carry in my bag the first year of marriage, which I'd never stopped practicing with at the family's private club on Saturday mornings, was out before my head registered the command. I fired twice. The one in front went down. The second one shouted. The third fired back and missed my head by 6 inches. The shot tore a chunk off the picture frame behind me. I fired again. The second one went down. The third ran for the stairwell door, slammed it, vanished. I stood there, on my feet, folder on the floor, gun in my hand, blood, not mine, on the right sleeve of the red blouse, which wasn't red anymore. It was worse. The private elevator unlocked behind me and opened. Luciano came running out. He saw me, standing, covered in blood, the gun dangling from the tips of fingers that had started trembling without my permission. He saw the 2 bodies in the hallway. He saw the brown folder on the floor. He saw the stairwell door open where the third one had fled. And, for the first time in 3 years, I saw Luciano Santoro's face lose its color. He crossed the hallway in 3 strides and grabbed me by the waist, pulled me against his chest, shoved his hand into my hair and pressed my head against the collar of his shirt, murmuring something I couldn't make out and which, I found out later, was my name, repeated 3 times. Chapter 5. Her name in his mouth. He carried me down the hallway in his arms. I told him I could walk. He didn't answer. He just slid one arm under my knees, the other across my back, lifted me off the ground, and took me down the dim hallway to the master bedroom door, the door I'd never crossed in 3 years of marriage. He kicked the door open, sat me on the edge of the double bed. "Don't leave this room, Luciano. Don't leave this room, Caterina." He walked out. I heard his voice giving orders in the hallway. Orso, building security, someone on the phone. 2 minutes later, he came back with a first aid kit, a damp cloth, and his jaw locked at an angle that looked more like a fracture than an expression. He sat down in front of me, knelt on the rug, took the cloth, lifted my right arm with the care of a man lifting something that might break, and started wiping off the blood that wasn't mine. That's when my hand started shaking. It wasn't a big tremor. It was a fine one, in the fingers, the kind a glass can still hide. Luciano stopped wiping, looked at my hand, didn't say anything, kept going. Wrist, forearm, inside of the elbow, the sleeve of the blouse, which wouldn't come off. My neck, which had a streak of blood where the third man's shot had passed close. The first one, the one who went down first. How old must he have been? I didn't think about it in the hallway. I thought about it there, with Luciano holding my wrist. 30, maybe 35. Maybe he had a wife, a son, a mother who was going to call him tomorrow and not understand why the phone rang and rang. My stomach came up. "Bathroom," I said. Luciano didn't ask anything. He lifted me up, led me to the door at the back of the room, held my hair while I threw up the champagne from earlier in the night, and the tea from the afternoon, and 2 days of silence I hadn't realized I'd been swallowing. He didn't speak, didn't touch me other than my hair. He just stayed. When I was done, he wet a face towel with cold water and ran it over my forehead, my mouth, the curve of my nape. He brought me back to the edge of the bed. He went to the closet, pulled out one of his silk shirts, and came back. "Take it off. Luciano, I'm not looking. Just take it off." I took off the soaked blouse, put on his shirt, which came down to mid-thigh. He put my blouse into a plastic bag that had appeared in the hallway without me noticing who'd brought it. Then he sat next to me on the bed, not touching, looking at the opposite wall. "The third one got away," he said. "I know. Orso went after him. Will he find him?" "He will." 2 minutes of silence. He didn't look at me. I didn't look at him. "I failed you," Luciano said low. "Luciano, I kept you invisible to protect you, and invisibility is what left you alone in a hallway with 3 armed men. I was wrong, Caterina. I was wrong for 3 years." I put my hand over his. "We can talk tomorrow. We talk now. We sleep first." He looked at me. "Sleep here." "Here where?" "In this bed. With me. Dressed. Next to me. I won't touch you, Caterina. I'm just not going to leave you in a separate room tonight." I nodded. He turned off the lights one by one, took off his shoes, lay down on his side on the bed, dressed, on top of the duvet. I lay down on the other side, dressed on top of the duvet, facing him. The brown folder sat on the nightstand on his side, untouched, waiting for the next morning. I slept with my forehead against his chest and his hand in the middle of my back, dressed, on top of the duvet, like two soldiers sleeping at the ready on the same watch. It wasn't his room, not yet. Luciano was in meetings all day Sunday. I stayed at the penthouse with Orso, who'd come back at dawn with the expression of a man who'd found the third guy and handled it. I didn't ask for details. Orso didn't volunteer any. In the middle of the afternoon, I went to the kitchen to make a cup of tea and found him standing at the marble island, eating a sandwich he'd made with his own hands. "Ma'am, Orso, if you want to know, ma'am, the one from the stairwell won't be bothering anyone else." "I don't want to know." "Perfect." He chewed, swallowed. "One more thing." "What?" He looked at me with a seriousness I'd never seen on his face. "If you're going to keep shooting men in the hallway, ma'am, I'll need a heads up so I can put the good sheets in storage." I laughed. For the first time in a week, I laughed with my whole stomach. Orso didn't smile, but the left corner of his mouth moved 0.5 millimeter, which, for that man, was basically a belly laugh. "Thank you, Orso." "You're welcome, ma'am." He walked out of the kitchen. I stood there with the tea in my hands and the first deep peace in several days. Monday afternoon, the Familia's conference room was on the building's 40th floor, one floor below the penthouse, with its own interior elevator, access restricted to Luciano, the capos, and the 3 soldiers of the main detail. Luciano called me down at 3. I came down dressed in black pants, black silk blouse, the long diamond earrings, because I wanted to remind the room I was there as a wife and not as a witness. When the elevator doors opened, the whole room was already full. 16 capos around the rectangular table, Orso standing against the east wall, Luciano seated at the head, the brown folder open in front of him, Carmine Santoro, in the chair to the right of the head, in a gray suit and a small smile of someone who still thought he was untouchable. Luciano pointed me to the chair on his left. I sat down. Carmine raised an eyebrow. "Luciano," he said, in the voice of a man doing his nephew a favor by opening the conversation. "You've never brought a wife to the table. Today I did." "Why?" "Because today we're going to settle something, Uncle, and I want her to see it." The room breathed differently. Some capos exchanged glances. 2 folded their hands on the table. Orso didn't move. Luciano opened the folder. "Aaron Vos," he read. "Port Inspector, Sector 4, overnight shift. Off-the-books payment of $250,000 into his daughter's account, deposited in 4 installments over the last 8 months. Source of the money, a canvas attributed to Morandi, sold through the Levitsky Gallery in Tribeca, at a price 30 times above estimate. The Levitsky Gallery is a front for the Kovats. The Familia's internal authorization to look the other way on the transaction carries a digital signature." He turned the paper toward Carmine. "Yours." He paused. Let Carmine register the word. Inspector Voss was arrested on Thursday, on his shift, taking delivery of the Kovats shipment in Sector 4. Capo Matteo Rizzi ran the op on my orders. The cargo is in my warehouse. The Kovats don't know yet that they've lost. The whole table went still. Carmine laughed. A dry, short laugh. The laugh of a man who'd rehearsed his defense across the 8 months he'd managed to hide the trail. "Luciano, this is a misunderstanding. You have 30 seconds to convince me. That document was forged. By Consigliere D'Angelo?" Carmine looked at me. That was a mistake. His glance lasted a second longer than it should have, and in that second, the small smile vanished from his face, replaced by something very close to contempt. I held his gaze without blinking. "You're using her," Carmine said to Luciano. "You're using a 25-year-old girl to justify a coup inside your own familia." Luciano stood up slowly. "Caterina," he said without looking at me, "tell Uncle Carmine what you found in the penthouse hallway on Saturday night." I stood up. 3 men, I said. Black suits, masks. They told me to hand over a folder and come with them without screaming. I killed 2. Orso got the 3rd one on the street 2 hours later. Luciano looked at Orso. Orso nodded. "The 3rd one," Orso said, "was a soldier from the West Wing, hired out of Capo Carmine's own pocket to take Mrs. Santoro to a house in Jersey. The confession is recorded." Carmine pushed his chair back. "Luciano, this is—" Luciano drew the gun from inside his jacket. It wasn't a quick motion. It was the exact motion of a man who'd rehearsed that instant for 16 years, since the night his mother died in Queens, since the day he realized his uncle had resented the seat his entire life. "You ordered my mother killed," Luciano said. His voice was a whisper. "I found out last year. I was waiting for clean proof." Carmine went pale. "You ordered an attack on my wife," Luciano went on. "In my building, on my floor, using men who carry my last name." "Luciano, you lost, Uncle." He fired once. Carmine fell backward with the chair. The table didn't move. The capos didn't move. Orso, against the wall, closed his eyes for a second, the kind of eye-closing of a soldier who'd been waiting for the order a long time. Luciano holstered the gun. He crossed the room and stopped at my side, took my hand in front of the 16 capos. "This is my wife," he said, in the voice that crosses a room without needing to be raised. "Caterina D'Angelo Santoro, daughter of Consigliere D'Angelo, owner of what's left of my name after today. Anyone who lays a hard look on her answers to me, and what I just did to my own blood proves I don't make exceptions for family." The 16 capos lowered their heads. Orso opened the door. Luciano led me out of the room with his hand closed around mine, his wedding ring pressing into my skin, the brown folder tucked under his other arm, the uncle's body still on the floor in the room behind us. In the elevator, he didn't let go of my hand. On the 42nd floor, he crossed the hallway with me, past my suite door without opening it, and stopped at the master bedroom door. He opened it, looked at me. "Come in," Luciano said. This time, come in. Chapter 6. The First Room. I went in. Luciano's master bedroom had the high 42nd floor ceiling, a wide bed with dark sheets, a full wall of glass facing Central Park, and a single bronze lamp lit on the nightstand to the right. It smelled like cedar, his skin, and something older I couldn't name. He closed the door behind me. He stood at the edge of the bed, white shirt open at the top 3 buttons, double crown tattoos climbing up his right forearm, sleeves still rolled up from the meeting downstairs. I walked over to him. I didn't ask anything. He didn't either. I pressed my flat palm against his chest, over his heart, and felt the rhythm under the fabric of the shirt. He put his hand on my waist. Wide palm, his thumb against the lowest rib, fingers spread as if he were measuring something he'd rehearsed in his head dozens of times without permission to carry out. 3 years, I said. 3 years, he said back. Then there's no hurry. None. He kissed me. It was different from the kiss in the car. That one had been 3 years arriving late. This one was 3 years arriving on time. His mouth found mine slowly, without rush, without performance, like a man who'd understood that this body here was his, not because the contract said so. It was his because I had decided it was. His shirt fell to the rug. Mine fell after. He picked me up and carried me to the bed as if I weighed less than I did, laid me down in the middle of the dark sheet, knelt between my legs, and stopped there, looking at me with an intensity that made me forget to breathe. "What is it?" I whispered. "I want to memorize your face." "What for?" "So, I never forget again that I almost lost you to pride." He leaned down. His mouth traveled down my neck, my chest, the curve of my collarbone, the ridge of my sternum. I gripped the sheet with my right hand when his mouth reached my navel and kept going. His sounds were low. Mine were too. The room was breathing with us. When he came back up, his body met my whole body, and I felt, for the first time, his weight settle on top of mine. Not crushing, measured. A weight that said, "I'm here. I'm not leaving. I'm not going to cover you with another silence." "Luciano." "Yeah." Slow. Slow. He came into me in a motion that lasted longer than I thought a motion like that could last. I gasped. He stopped. Waited. When I nodded, he kept going. No rush, no performance, nothing to prove. The rhythm was slow, and then dense, and then slow again, and his fingers searched for mine on top of the sheet and locked in. His name came out of my mouth. Mine came out of his. Caterina. Luciano. Caterina. 3 times. 3 years made up for in 3 syllables. His voice breaking on the 3rd. His body started moving denser, deeper, more urgent. Mine answered without needing to be told. I arched. He pinned my hip with his free hand, and the whole world of the apartment, Central Park behind the glass, the city lit up, the hallway where there'd been blood the night before, disappeared for an instant that didn't fit on any clock. I broke first. He followed seconds later, forehead pressed to mine, body tightening in one last thrust, and a low sound he tried to hold back and couldn't. We lay still, the breathing coming back. The beat of his heart against my chest coming back, the feel of his weight on top of mine coming back to what it had been before the surrender, and also becoming forever something new. He rested his forehead against mine. "No more separate rooms," Luciano said. "No more silence," I said. He smiled. I'd never seen that smile before, and I realized in that instant that maybe nobody in that man's entire history had ever seen that smile before. I slept with his hand resting in the middle of my chest, and he slept with his forehead against my shoulder, a posture that was neither a familia boss's nor an armed man's. It was the posture of someone who, for the first time in 16 years, had stopped watching the door. I didn't know that night that peace was a gesture he'd forgotten how to make 16 years earlier, and that forgotten gestures When they come back, carry other things with them. But that was Luciano Santoro's last thought before he slept, and my father's first when he handed me the folder on Saturday, and the sentence he'd kept tucked in his mouth without explaining. That night, I didn't ask. I slept with his breath on my shoulder, and let what he'd inherited from his mother wait one more night. Lena here, that wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee. He was finally sleeping next to me. For the first time in 3 years and 6 weeks, I was at peace, until the night Luciano got the call, and his face came apart in a way I'd never seen. He hung up, looked at me, said 3 words. Varga is alive. I didn't know who Varga was. I knew that for 15 years Luciano had been hunting a name the rest of the world had written off as dead. I knew his mother hadn't died on the orders of a single man, and that Uncle Carmine, whom Luciano had executed the week before, might not be the end of the tally. That same morning, I'd taken the test in secret in the bathroom. 2 lines. And the first person to find out I was pregnant wasn't my husband. It was the one person who could never, under any circumstance, know. Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Unfortunately, many people have been downloading our audio, effectively copying the entire story, and simply reposting it on YouTube. If you want to watch the original story and be the first to receive the next ones, search for My Stories by Lena on YouTube to get the best dark romance content. Remember, the official channel is My Stories by Lena on YouTube. I'll be waiting for you there.